Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. It was just after midnight when I heard the knock on my door, not the kind of knock you'd expect in the middle of the night, soft, hesitant, almost as if the person wasn't sure whether they should be there or not. I was sitting on the couch, curled up with a cup of tea, flicking through a book I'd read a dozen times. My house was quiet, as it usually was at that hour, and I almost convinced myself that I hadn't heard anything, but then the knock came again, more persistent this time. I set my cup down on the coffee table and got up to answer. The clock on the wall read 12:15 p.m., and I could feel a strange knot forming in my stomach. My mind raced through the possibilities. Who could it be? I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not this late. When I opened the door, there stood Daniel, my neighbor. Daniel, mid-40s, with a kind smile and a voice that always seemed to carry just the right amount of warmth. We'd exchanged pleasantries over the fence a few times, but aside from that, our interactions had been minimal. He looked a little disheveled, his usual neat clothes now rumpled, and his eyes held an intensity I hadn't seen before. "Oh, I'm sorry to bother you," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, his gaze flicking nervously to the ground. "I just needed someone to talk to." I was taken aback, but I stepped aside, motioning for him to come in. "Of course, Daniel. What's going on?" I asked, my voice softening as I tried to read the look on his face. He hesitated for a moment before stepping in, his footsteps slow and deliberate. The living room, dimly lit by a few lamps, seemed to hold its breath as he stood there, looking like a man at war with himself. "I've been having a rough time," he started, his voice low. "Things have been complicated. I didn't know who else to turn to." I nodded, inviting him to sit down, and we both settled on the couch. My mind was racing, trying to understand why he's come to me. What could possibly be so important that he would show up like this, unannounced and out of nowhere? He exhaled deeply before continuing. "I didn't know who else to ask, but I've been thinking about it, and I need to say it out loud. I don't know if I can keep pretending everything's fine anymore." The weight of his words hit me, and I found myself holding my breath, unsure of how to respond. I had always known Daniel to be composed, always in control of his emotions, but right now he seemed like a man completely unraveling. "Whatever it is, Daniel," I said, my voice steady, "you don't have to keep it in, you can tell me." He looked at me then, and for the first time that night, his eyes seemed to soften as if some invisible barrier between us had started to crumble. He cleared his throat, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. "I'm not sure how to say this," he began, "but there's something I've been struggling with, something I've never told anyone." His voice faltered slightly, and I could tell how much it cost him to speak those words. The air in the room seemed to shift as he carefully placed his hands in his lap, his fingers twitching slightly as if unsure what to do with them. "I've been dealing with some feelings I can't ignore anymore," he admitted, "and they involve you." I blinked, taken off guard. I didn't expect this. I wasn't sure what to think, let alone say. My heart began to race, and I could feel the pulse in my neck as he spoke. Was this some kind of joke, a misunderstanding, or was there something deeper here? "Daniel, I don't," my voice trailed off, unsure of where this conversation was going. I had always been fond of him as a neighbor, but never beyond that. We talked, sure, but nothing more than casual exchanges, never anything like this. His eyes never left mine as he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know this is unexpected, and I know it might seem strange, but there's a part of me that's been fighting this for so long, fighting the idea of even telling you because I don't want to complicate things between us." He paused, his gaze turning inward, lost in thought. "But the truth is I can't keep pretending I don't feel it. I think I've been hiding it from myself for too long." My breath caught in my throat as the realization hit me, slow but undeniable. This wasn't just a conversation about emotions, it was something more, something raw and honest that neither of us had prepared for. I felt a mix of emotions, surprise, confusion, even a bit of fear, but something else was there too, something I couldn't quite name yet. "I'm not asking for anything or to cross any lines," he added quickly, his tone more earnest than before. "I just needed to say it out loud, maybe just to make it real for once, maybe to see if you could ever feel the same way." The tension between us was thick, almost palpable, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. The quiet seemed to stretch on forever, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest, my mind trying to process everything that had just unfolded. Daniel's admission hung in the air, and I wasn't sure how to respond. The weight of his words was settling into me, and I could feel the gravity of the moment like the calm before a storm. I wasn't sure where this conversation would lead, but one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same between us again. And as much as I wanted to keep things simple, to retreat to the safety of normalcy, I knew deep down that I couldn't ignore what was happening, what had already started to happen. The silence stretched between us for what felt like an eternity. I could hear my pulse in my ears, the tension in the room so thick that it felt like we were both stuck in a moment, unable to move forward or back. Daniel sat there, his hands still in his lap, not daring to look away from me. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions: surprise, confusion, and something deeper, something more unsettling. His words, raw and vulnerable, had cracked open a door I didn't even know was there, but I had no idea how to step through it. I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice to say something that would make sense of all this. Daniel, I started, but I couldn't finish. I wasn't sure how to respond to what he had just confessed. Could I even respond? Could I say something that wouldn't make the situation worse? Or was this something that just needed to unfold on its own? He must have sensed my hesitation, because he quickly spoke again, his voice gentle but urgent. I'm not asking for anything, really. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I just needed to say it out loud because I can't keep carrying this anymore. I don't even know what I'm hoping for, honestly. He shifted slightly, leaning forward, his eyes full of that familiar sincerity I had always admired. I just needed to know if you ever wondered the same thing, if maybe there was something there between us. His words hung in the air, and for a moment I found myself speechless. I hadn't wondered, at least not consciously. Daniel had always been there, a friendly neighbor, someone I could chat with in passing, but this was new territory. And yet there was something undeniably compelling about it, something that made my heart race and my mind spin in a dozen different directions. I finally managed to speak, my voice unsteady. Daniel, I don't know what to say. I wasn't expecting this. I didn't think you felt like this. I looked away for a moment, trying to steady myself, gathering my thoughts. I've always seen you as a friend, someone I could trust, but this is different. It feels strange. I could tell that my words stung, and it wasn't lost on me that they were far from what he wanted to hear. But the truth was, I didn't know how to handle this new reality, this shift in the dynamic between us. I know it's a lot to process, Daniel said quietly, his voice full of understanding, and I'm not asking for an answer right now. I just needed to be honest with you. No more pretending, no more hiding. I respect you and I respect our friendship. If nothing else, I want that to remain the same. His words were gentle, but they carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. It was clear that he had thought this through for far longer than I had. But I wasn't sure if I could simply return to the way things were. What if something had changed forever? What if there was something I wasn't seeing? The idea of exploring this, of seeing where it could go, was both exciting and terrifying. But I wasn't ready to jump into anything, especially not without understanding what I was feeling. I needed time. Time to figure out if I felt the same way. Time to process everything he had just revealed. I don't want to lose our friendship, Daniel, I said after a pause, my voice firm but soft. I really don't, but I need time to think this through, to understand what this all means. I can't give you an answer right now. He nodded, his gaze steady, though I could see the faintest hint of disappointment in his eyes. But he didn't argue, he simply looked at me with that quiet understanding, as though he had been preparing for this very moment. I get it, he said softly. I'm not going anywhere. I'll give you all the time you need. Just don't shut me out, okay? Don't let this ruin what we've built. I couldn't help but admire his calm demeanor in the face of such vulnerability. His ability to accept my uncertainty with grace was something I hadn't expected. But it also made me feel safe, like I could take my time without the pressure of making a hasty decision. Thank you, I whispered, my heart swelling with appreciation for the man sitting in front of me. I promise I won't shut you out. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the conversation settling in the room like a heavy fog. There was a quiet understanding between us now, a shift in our relationship that neither of us could ignore. but even in the silence I could feel that something had changed. Something deep, something that would shape both of us in ways we couldn't yet understand. Eventually, Daniel stood up, his movements slow and deliberate. I should probably go, I didn't mean to keep you up this late. I stood as well, my mind still racing. I didn't want him to leave, but I knew he needed to. We both needed space to think. Thanks for coming by, I said, forcing a smile even though my emotions were still tangled inside, and for being honest with me. He smiled a small but genuine smile before turning toward the door. Anytime, take care of yourself, alright? I'll be around if you need me. And just like that, he was gone. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, my thoughts spinning in 1,000 different directions. What did this all mean? Was there something between us, or was this just a passing moment of vulnerability that we would both move past? I didn't know. But one thing was certain: things had changed, and no matter what came next, I had a feeling that my life and my relationship with Daniel would never be the same again. The days that followed Daniel's visit felt like a strange in-between, as though I was walking a tightrope. Every encounter with him was laced with an undercurrent of something unspoken, something that hung between us like a delicate thread. I found myself replaying our conversation in my mind over and over again, wondering if I had made the right choice, wondering if I had been too quick to ask for space, too quick to distance myself from him. But I couldn't ignore what he had said, what he had revealed. There had always been a quiet intensity in our friendship, something deeper than just neighborly pleasantries or casual chats. Maybe I had always known it but hadn't wanted to see it for what it was. A week passed and still, I found myself thinking about him more than I cared to admit. I noticed little things: the way his eyes softened when he looked at me, the way his smile lingered a moment longer than it used to, as though there was something he wanted to say but couldn't. And every time we crossed paths, I felt a flicker of that same tension we'd shared that night, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. But what did it all mean? I didn't have the answers. Not yet. But I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't keep running from the truth. I couldn't keep pretending that I didn't feel something. Something more than just friendship. I had to confront it. I had to figure out what this was, what it could be. And so, after days of deliberation, I finally found myself standing in front of his door. My heart was pounding, my hands clammy as I lifted my fist to knock. This was it. The moment of truth. The door swung open almost immediately, and there he was, looking every bit as surprised as I felt. Daniel's eyes widened, his expression unreadable for a moment, before a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Hey," he said, his voice warm but cautious. "I didn't expect you. Is everything okay?" I nodded, but I could feel the words building up inside me, struggling to find their way out. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew I had to say something. "I've been thinking," I began, my voice a little shaky, "a lot actually, about us, about what you said that night, and I think I've been avoiding the truth." Daniel didn't interrupt, he just watched me with that same patient, understanding gaze. His silence gave me the courage to continue. "The truth is, Daniel," I said, stepping closer, "I've been feeling something too, something I didn't know how to process at first, and I didn't know if I should let myself feel it or if it was just a fleeting moment. But now I know I don't want to deny it anymore. I don't want to push it aside because I'm scared of what it might mean, because I care about you, more than I ever thought possible." His gaze softened, and I could see the relief in his eyes, like a weight had been lifted. He reached out, taking my hands gently in his touch warm and reassuring. "I'm glad you said that," he murmured. "I've been hoping for this, but I never wanted to pressure you. I want to be with you. If you're ready for that, I want to see where this goes. No expectations, no rush, just us, figuring things out together." Tears welled up in my eyes, though I didn't know why. It wasn't sadness. It was more like the realization that I had been holding my breath for so long and now I could finally exhale. I wasn't alone in this. We were in it together. "I'm ready," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to find out with you." And just like that, the tension that had been building between us melted away. There were no grand gestures, no over-the-top declarations. Just two people standing in the quiet of the moment, choosing to be honest with each other, choosing to explore something new. The weight of the past few weeks, the uncertainty and the fear lifted in that simple exchange. In that quiet, intimate moment, I felt the beginnings of something new, something real. We stood there for a while, just holding hands, savoring the peace that had come with this newfound understanding. There was no need for words anymore. Everything we needed to say had already been spoken. And it was enough. As the evening settled in, we made our way to the couch, sitting close but not quite touching, just letting the closeness of our presence speak for itself. There was no rush. No pressure. Just two people, slowly and carefully, learning to navigate this new chapter of their lives together. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real. And that was enough.